If you're trying to conceive and feeling overwhelmed with fertility advice, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, your fertility podcast and antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm Hannah, a fertility acupuncturist, teacher and campaigner for better fertility education. This podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex ed at school, with the aim of improving your understanding of your reproductive health and optimizing your fertility. Andrea, welcome to the show. It's really lovely to have you here today. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us about your work, please?
Hello, Hannah, and yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I would be happy to tell you about my work. I am a sex, love, and relationship coach. So I work with couples as well as individuals on finding, keeping, and thriving in love. So I work with men, I work with women, I work with anyone who wants to work with me, to help them have really more pleasurable love lives and really thrive in the love that they're making, the love that they're having.
Which is really why, obviously, why I asked you and invited you to come on this podcast, because it's a very common problem that we see with people when we work in clinic one-to-one, in that when people are trying to conceive, often, and it's like ironic, isn't it? But often what happens is that sex becomes difficult and it loses its connection and enjoyable parts, and all of the things that are great about sex become not great about sex. And there's always that common phrase that people who, when the same people who say just relax and it will happen, often can say things like, oh, it's fun trying. And what we see is actually the complete opposite of that, in that it becomes very, very far from fun. So can you just explain a little bit about why that happens? Why is that such a common predicament in for people when they're trying to conceive?
Yeah. I would even just take a couple steps back and say that for many couples, that they're not having the sex that they want to be having or that they thought they might have with this partner, or in some way their sexual lives don't seem to reflect the level of beauty and friendship and love that they actually feel in their lives. So we make assumptions that because people are wanting to have children and conceive, that their sex life is as good as their love life and vice versa. And sometimes there can be a bit of discrepancy between what they're actually feeling on an emotional level, on even a soul connection with a person, or even and how they're connecting mentally with how they're experiencing their sex lives. And so that is one, when I work with couples, that's kind of the first thing that I look to understand is, what is that holistic view of your relationship, and where do you feel like there's great connection and fluidity and expression, and where does it feel like actually we have such a great relationship? I hear this over and over again. We have such a great relationship, but it's sex that just isn't what we'd like it to be. And it's a shared desire sometimes, or sometimes it's one person or the other that'll desire a different experience. So I never enter with the assumption that everything is good on any level until I kind of hear from the couple or from both people what they're experiencing and what's going on. I want to normalize that, because we oftentimes look at other people who are having, other couples that are having that have a relationship, and we think, oh, now they're going to have a baby, oh, they're trying and everything's got to be great. And so it's just kind of normalizing this fact that what we see on the outside isn't always what's happening on the inside of a relationship. So if you are experiencing this kind of thing where you have a great connection in some ways, but then there's a mismatch in other ways, it's totally normal and it's totally okay. And it doesn't have to mean anything right now. So just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Yeah. And so are you saying, if I'm hearing this right, that kind of it's, there might be a misconnection before you even go into the journey of trying to conceive?
Absolutely.
So it's to look at the relationship beforehand.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not always, but often. I would say. And maybe it's because those are the people who are coming to me, knowing that I work not just in the space of relationships as far as the emotional intimacy and connection, but also directly with sex and sexuality. And that's not something that every couples therapist will work with or couples coach will work with. I work specifically with sex and sexuality as much as with emotional, spiritual, mental connection, that kind of intimacy as well. So we work with intimacy in a holistic, a whole whole human kind of way.
Yeah, because really, you can't really separate these things out, can you?
Well, that's a choice. That's another choice. So you don't have
Mm.
to have this kind of relationship that looks any particular way. You don't have to connect in any one area. There can be kind of like a mix and match sort of thing of we connect really well emotionally, but then I go for my kind of intellectual stimulation to my friends, and then, oh, we connect okay on a sexual level. That's all right, but then I go to tango because that's where I can really explore some parts of me that my partner isn't really open to seeing or being with. Totally okay. As long as you decide that together. I always feel where I test for how where it might not be so okay is if one person or the other isn't aware of what the agreements are. So are there
Mm.
agreements that are unspoken? And not everything needs to be shared. This isn't making the assumption that everything needs to be shared and all the details to be kind of coordinated and worked out. That also is that navigating of, okay, what do we share? How much do we share? What areas do we want to explore within our relationship that feel really good, and what wants to be explored outside of our relationship that feels good for both of us? And staying in that space so there's no deception. Deception happens when one or the other person steps beyond line together, kind of boundaries of what's being agreed upon. Is that all making sense? I'm kind of speaking
Yeah.
a little bit outside
No,
of
no. This no, this is good stuff because the thing that we see a lot in clinic is that people often get to the point where they really do not want to have sex. So, they're trying to conceive. They know that they need to have sex through their ovulation window, and they find that the pressure can be too much. So the man isn't able to get an erection, isn't able to ejaculate. They aren't, or that they only have sex during that time and it becomes very functional. There's not a lot of joy. And often, a common issue around fertility is people just not having enough sex to give themselves the best opportunity with each cycle. And then you just become very quickly locked into a negative cycle of feeling stress then affecting your libido. It's very, very complicated, and people often really struggle of how to unpick that and what to do next. What thoughts do you have around that scenario?
If you find yourself getting so kind of into this funnel or into this loop of, oh, it's getting more complicated and it's feeling like we're going on this we're in a spin, we're sort of spinning out, then, and I would say if you've tried everything, then I would say definitely speaking to a therapist or a coach can help. So the first step, though, is speaking to one another. So if you're able to really talk openly, and not everyone can, so the people that we sleep with and are intimate with can be the most difficult to actually have intimate conversations about sex with, despite the fact that those are the people that we're having it with, especially when we make it mean so many different things. So if we're having sex or we're not having sex, this is what it means about a relationship. This is what it means about how much I want to have a baby and you don't. This is what it means about how committed you are to our dreams or you're not. What we make it mean and how we're interpreting what's happening can really begin to affect then what is actually shared between people. And it can get really knotted up and confusing and confused. And then there's pressure and there's time pressure and all the things feel really overwhelming. So it can help to get some support. Also to have support from community. So how communities or groups with other people, other couples that are experiencing similar things can really, really help as well. If you have one or two family members or friends that you can speak to that you know will be non-judgmental, and be able to listen and hear you with an open heart and mind. Usually it's just one or two people that have those special skills that can really help support a couple as well. And then there are tactical things, and I'm happy to speak to those things as well. Some of the things that I do when I work with couples or suggest that people try that I can share, I'm happy to share as well too. So yeah, because there can be different reasons why blockers are coming up or certain patterns are playing out that could have some the situation and could have things to do with what was going on way before you guys even started to want to have a child together and begin that process.
So before, let's say if before a couple are ready, let's say they're before they're ready to go and speak to a therapist, what things would you suggest people try before they get to that point? Like, what are the common sense things that people could do themselves that might help this situation?
So, talking about it from a place of sharing what you're experiencing emotionally versus
Mm.
what can come across as criticism or blame or anything like that. So, having connected conversations about difficult subjects is actually a skill that we don't usually learn. So, having those kind of conversations where you're able to really share what you're experiencing, the meaning that you're making, what's happening for you, and then having that space to listen to your partner and hear what they're experiencing, they're making, and what it means to them without having it be kind of like, okay, and then the consequences are of this conversation without having it be anything that is going to mean one thing or another again. So I have a free ebook that I'm happy to share. I just penned on how to talk about sex. So there's some really good tips in there about conversation starters, when to have the conversations, how to have the conversation, structure around languaging that you can use to get you started, and how to hold yourself so that you can be with whatever comes up in those conversations. Communications are really, really big ones. So talking about it is I would say the first step.
That sounds super helpful because I think, I don't know whether it is everyone always talks about the British and their inability, to talk openly about sex and, the whole kind of British mentality. I don't know whether that's still true or not, but I think that I often hear people in clinic reflect to me that they find it really difficult to know what to do, how to have that conversation, and where to go to get that support. And people often feel embarrassed that they don't want to talk about it with their family or friends. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of fear around the inability to have sex or the fact that they don't enjoy sex anymore. And it's really hard, isn't it? Of like, where do you go with all those feelings and thoughts? So if it's a structured kind of um, workbook to look at, I think that would be a really, really helpful starting point for people.
Yeah, yep, it is. It's there. It's free. Anyone can pick it up and use it. I also have other free resources on my site that people can use to access the erotic and getting to know themselves in a different way, because that's another opportunity, let's say, with all of the pressure and all of the things happening. This sense of play and joy in connecting intimately can really get lost. And so it really wants a conscious kind of reframe of saying, okay, now that we are dedicating time and energy and intention to this space, how can we keep it light and how can it be playful? How can we learn about ourselves in whole new ways? Now that we've really dedicated this time and attention to this part of our lives when many couples just don't. So, one way of kind of rethinking things is for couples who are conceiving or in couples who aren't conceiving, the first kind of rules from sex therapists or sex coaches will be schedule in sex. And every couple's resistant and goes, I don't want to have this thing be another thing on the to-do list. I don't want it to have to be scheduled in. I want it to be spontaneous and natural. And okay, well, if it were going to be spontaneous and natural, then you'd be doing it and you're not. So what are we going to do? And with the couple that I'm currently working with, who are fantastic, like, okay, we're going to schedule in some sex and we're going to give you a little bit of a kind of like a space to play in. So the practice is called the five senses reality, and couples who are conceiving can play this as well. Where you're working with the five senses and one folded, the other person's gathering the materials, let's say, to play with the sensorial experience of intimacy. So what does that person love to smell or taste? What kind of touch do they love? And having that session, because it is really a session, it needs to be planned, it needs to be scheduled, has transformed how this couple is experiencing intimacy. They're like, we're playing like we're teenagers, and they're well into their 40s. It's like, we're having a great time, and we've never really experienced sex like that. So for them, they're not particularly trying to conceive and scheduling sex. So it's a little bit different, but it's worked also with other couples as well, who've been in a different space, of bringing play back in, and that freedom and joy to just explore and not to have it lead to anything or be anything in particular. It's really creating the intentional space and time to have that time together. It can feel like a bit of I don't know if paradox is kind of the right word, or counterproductive, especially if you're considering conception, but taking out that pressure for every single time to have to lead to penetration and sex is also a key to relaxing and helping both partners relax. Because oftentimes men will speak about how it affects performance, but for women, when you're feeling pressure and pressurized to have sex, it really affects pleasure. And that has a knock-on effect on how your partner experiences sex as well, especially if they really have a generous heart and would love for you to experience pleasure when they know you're not. That also feeds the shutdown as well. So that can kind of become an agent for this not so helpful pattern of shutting down during sex for both partners, and make it really not very fun at all. Yeah.
So what would you say, because the issue obviously that we see a lot in clinic is that people are very much focusing on sex around their ovulation window. So let's say they're tracking their cycle, they're using ovulation predictor kits, and they're like, okay, we need to have sex today because I'm ovulating and it has to happen now because this is, the most likely time to conceive. How can people get around that kind of pressure of that situation? Have you got any kind of tactics? Because in that situation, it often does become very much perfunctory. We've just got to, lots of people say to me, we just have to get it done. It just has to get done. And, and that, it's not always the best, because sometimes the partner can't then perform in that situation with that pressure. What would you say in that situation where they know they just have to do it, or they don't have to do it, but they're sort of feeling that they have to do it at that point in time?
So if you expand that window to the entire month, expanding that window of when you're connecting intimately, it takes the pressure off of that one-shot deal. So if you're connecting consistently over time, then this is just another time that you're connecting intimately. Many of us don't learn how to connect intimately in sensual, sometimes sexual ways, but not always, outside of vagina sex. So penetrative sex, we don't learn ways to connect sensually and sexually outside of just that one way of connecting. So it feels like we've got to do that one thing in that one way on that one day, and the rest of the time we're just shutting it all out because people are too tired or stressed. Life is busy and they don't create the time or space. Really, they're symptomatic of what actually is stopping a lot of couples from having sex too, is just no connection from one moment to the next. It's kind of like it then becomes task driven. So, of course, I understand that we live busy lives and that everyone has this very kind of like too much busyness happening all the time. And it feels like there's no way to really step back from that. And I would challenge you, if this is a priority in your life, which obviously it is because they're coming to clinic, they really want to have a family, to see where in your life you can get support. So calling on family and friends to come over and clean, or come over and do something that just helps you. If you have other kids, take care of those kids so you can just have some time to rest and kick back, so that you can invest more time into connecting with your partner in intimacy without feeling completely exhausted, disconnected, and just like it's a thing you've got to do. So if you can do that more consistently, then you're just doing it, and it's, hey, this is a time when we're doing it with a bit more intention than normal, and maybe not. Maybe your intention becomes every single time we're connecting in pleasure, we're connecting intentionally to be there with our partner. physically, emotionally.
Mm.
That's the ideal. And then life is tricky. Just recognizing that.
So would you say then, I guess, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but what do you think then around, using ovulation predictor kits and all the kind of femtech around spotting your ovulation window? Do you think that's a help or a hindrance when people are trying to conceive?
You could drop it and see what happens.
Mm.
So dropping the tech a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and seeing what happens. We drop the tech and tune into our bodies and desire. Are we feeling like we want to have sex, that we want to connect with our partner? Seeing what happens then. It's an experiment. You can always go back to the tech. If it feels like, no, we feel more secure, feel more safe, knowing that's our window, it helps us to relax more. Great. If it's nerving you up even more, drop it for a little while. It doesn't have to be forever, and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I feel like if you know your cycle and if you know that your period comes regularly, if you've tracked for a while and you ovulate roughly around the same time and you get your body signs and symptoms, then I do think there comes a point where ovulation predictor kits, BBT charting, femtech, it all becomes another stress in life. And I think that it's those minor stresses on a daily basis that kind of really don't help, exactly as you've been saying, about creating more space and about creating less stress. So I feel like they can be helpful in some situations, but they can also very quickly become negative, quite quickly, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. If you're going to look at anything, look at your Fitbit. Because exercising and moving your body and keeping energy flowing helps with libido. It helps you relax in sex. It keeps your body. So aside from talking about sex, getting support from community, even if it's a community that's focused on this area, because within your family or friends group, you just don't have that space or feel shameful. So talking about sex with your partner, connecting to community, keeping your exercise levels up, and eating healthy are some of the most tactical, non-sexy, like sexual tips and tricks, things that are also foundational. And then as
Mm.
far as intimate connection, it's leaving space for exploration and play and bringing the joy back in again to that space.
So I guess what I'm hearing there as well is that what you need is to create and make time. So exactly like you said in the beginning about planning it in, creating time, which people often feel quite funny about, like scheduling in sex. But what you're saying is not scheduling in sex, it's about scheduling time together to make that connection, to
It
then,
changes,
kind of put that groundwork in for sex to happen.
it changes the game. It changes the game.
Yeah.
Couple, like I say, that just I'm the most recent, and we're just working on this now, said, wow, I never expected that there would be so much change that would happen just from creating time and space for this. And now I realize, like everything else I do in my life, I just want some time and space and some intentional thought, intentional preparation. And it was fun as a result. We had a great time. I had a great time preparing for this. They had like call it a date night for this connection. We had such a good time preparing. I could be really creative. It really made me think about my partner and what they liked and about what I wanted to share. I thought about what I was going to wear. I got really excited for it. Got excited for the music. It's like, instead of just kind of, hoping that at a certain time your partner's going to want sex at the same time as you, which is also another myth.
Mm.
Oftentimes we don't. Yeah, as both people knew and could prepare and get themselves ready for what was going to happen. Not everyone experiences spontaneous desire. Some are responsive in the way we experience desire. So having something to look forward to for those who are more responsive, knowing that they're going to get the time and attention from their partner, knowing they could slow down and maybe have more time to warm up, have more time in foreplay, to have more time really just being together with their partner without having it to be rushed or anything else, feels oftentimes really good to the nervous system. really good to the body and really, really opens you up for pleasure in whole new ways. So I can't say enough for scheduling in beautiful, intimate sex. And then, of course, people are feeling like they're scheduling it in with their femtech stuff. So if that feels like under stress, or schedule in a few different times during the month, which completely has nothing to do with ovulation time, and see what happens.
I love that. That's such good advice and good information.
Yeah, well, it works. I've seen it work over and over again, so that's why I share it. Worked for me, it works for the people I work with, continues to work for me, continues to work for the people that I work with, so never go.
So tell me, if somebody was to be interested in working with someone like yourself, what would happen in an actual session? Like if a couple came to you, what do you do in a session with them?
So in the very first session, it's usually a visioning session. So what are you experiencing now? And what would you like to experience instead? So if everything could shift or change, then what would good feel like? What would great feel like? Where do you want to be and where are you now? Understanding where people want to go to and get to is fundamental in getting I'm a coach, so we work on focusing pretty quickly on moving people through to where they want to be. I'm a therapeutic coach, so there's space for exploration, but really, really having that idea, okay, where do you actually want to be? What would a beautiful, healthy sex life look like at this time, this very particular time that you're in together? What would it feel like? What would you be experiencing more of? What are you, and this is for both people because times are very different, and one or the other person doesn't even realize it about their partner. Oh, I didn't know you wanted that. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that was where we were going. Oh, really? Okay. And so getting them to create a shared story about where they're going to is really a connecting kind of practice. It brings clarity, it brings focus, and it can help us really get direction. It also begins to tease out some of the places in the relationship and the relating that may want a bit of focus and attention. So for couples who come just about their sex life, pretty much 100% of the time isn't just about their sex life. There'll be
Mm.
something in the way that they're relating, something in the dynamic of their relationship that also wants some attention, something within themselves that wants looking at with Joel. So it's an individual journey, it's a couples together journey, relational journey, as much as it is a journey through desire and understanding what people want to have.
And it's so funny, isn't it? Because in a relationship, it's not the kind of thing that you just assume. There's so much around assumption, isn't there? You just assume that you're going to have sex. You just assume that this is what it's going to be like. There's never that. Well, there's not often that forethought, conscientious conversation about what it means and what it looks like for each person. It's not something that we discuss or that we sort of talk about a lot, but it makes so much sense that that would be a really healthy way of looking at it, like
Mm,
everything else.
mm. And couples, even couples who have been together for years and years, sometimes never talk about what they're open to and what they'd like to experience. So it can
Mm.
feel challenging. It can feel really challenging for a couple, and for an individual as well, to hear the desires of their partner that they never knew existed. And it can also be really revelatory, and it can open fresh new pathways to connecting, to experiencing pleasure, to experiencing sex that they never ever imagined. So it's
Mm.
liberating. It garners deeper levels of acceptance and love, being seen and heard, being fully understood by a partner. And these are all of the ingredients for intimate connection. These are all of the things that want to be opened up. And again, not everything needs to be shared. Not everything is meant to be shared. However, when we do come together and share in new ways, then new possibilities do emerge. So it can be a really beautiful opportunity for couples to come even closer, for sure. Have courageous conversations, because they do require quite a lot of courage. A lot of the shame that you spoke to, a lot of that gets healed when you're seen in what you actually do desire and want, what you're curious about, what you may or may not act on. It's so such a beautiful, beautiful coming together and process of growth and development for sure. And then more pleasure comes of it ultimately, more nourishment, more fulfillment, more wholeness, and the way that we live our sexual and intimate erotic lives. It's a good place to be.
So if there are people listening to this who, like, what would be your three? I think we've already discussed them, but could you recap on the three, because people like really practical steps that they can take, what can I do in this situation? So what would be your top three practical tips for those people who are listening, who are thinking, you know what, I'm really struggling here and I don't know what to do about it?
So talking about it with your partners, the first. And if you don't know where to start, there's the guide that I shared. There's lots of information out there. You can use AI now, which I recommend. And just pop in question and talk to me as if you were a sex therapist. How do I begin a conversation about sex with my partner? See what comes back, because the AI is really can be very supportive. And then the next is reducing stress, reducing the fatigue in your life, the exhaustion levels come down by asking for support from community, from friends and family. If you can have the resources to do it, hiring in help so that you have more time to relax and take pressure off day-to-day life and living. Just have more space for being. And then increasing exercise. And I was saying that that's kind of part of that reducing stress. If you're exercising, moving your body, then that can be great. And then exploring, so intentionally exploring pleasure, specifically pleasure. So in the times when you're connecting and lovemaking, great. In between those times, what feels like pleasure to do? What feels pleasurable in your body? How many different ways can you say yes to pleasure and what feels good, especially for women?
Great.
Especially for women, and for men with feeling that pressure to perform. If you need to hear from your partner, if it doesn't work this time, am I loved anyway? That's sometimes the question. If it doesn't work, am I going to be loved anyway? And even stating that out to your partner, it's very vulnerable, can feel very edgy. Tell me that you love me no matter what. It's going to be okay. I need to hear that, or whatever it is that you need to hear. If you can dial into that, what is it that is making me feel so nervous right now? If it doesn't work, then it means I'm not a real man. If it doesn't work, it means I am not attractive. If it doesn't work, it means my wife's no longer going to love me. My partner's no longer going to desire. What are you making it mean that in that moment you're unable to have penetrative sex? I can't really quite say that. And soft cock is sexy. So women and men both need to learn a soft cock can be sexy. You can bite penis and vagina even when there isn't an erection, and sometimes that can feel like really nourishing, healthy, beautiful connection. And sometimes it helps the man to feel accepted, even if, and then from there, he's able to get erect and move into lovemaking. And if not, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That might be the title of this podcast. Soft cock is okay.
It is. It's good. It's sexy. It's nourishing. It feels good to connect that way. It can be guided right into your body and just be, and it feels so good to have that experience. So anyone who hasn't tried it, I absolutely recommend trying that out too. Soft cock and sex. Finish there.
Great. I love it. I love it. Andrea, that is amazing, because you know what? I've been wanting to do this podcast for such a long time, because it is such a common thing that we talk about in clinic, and people often feel like they're the only ones that this is happening to, and they very quickly feel very isolated and vulnerable and ashamed. And there's just so many feelings that come up as a result of sex when you're trying to conceive. And so I think this is so brilliant and so helpful, and I will link your resource, because that sounds like such a good place for people to start. And I think just listening to this and knowing that it's completely normal is just helpful in itself. So I really want to say thank you for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
My pleasure. I hope it's helped everyone and anyone who needs it. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Andrea. If you've enjoyed listening to this and want to find out more, then come and join my free community in Facebook. We have loads of resources. You can catch up on all our previous webinars and be the first to know about forthcoming events. To sign up, just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work one-to-one with myself or one of the team, then please see our website, hannahpern.com, where you can book in directly or organise a discovery call to find out how we can support your fertility and your reproductive health.